Welcome back, everyone, and we're going to take a look at magic items, but not a lot of them. Magic items in Tasha's are pretty extensive. We've added in a lot more items, a lot more artifacts, some rather terrifying. We've got our Illuminator's tattoo, many different tattoos. Prosthetic limbs are there, which is a thing that is a theme in Grey Owl's Book 2. I wouldn't have them require attunement, but I think that's a setting choice, not a necessarily a criticism of the book. However, there are some magical items that are presented here that provide curious concerns here and there, and I think I'm going to turn it over to John to address at least one of those.
Yeah, so one of the more legitimate criticisms of this book as a whole is that one of the things it introduces to 5th edition is power creep. And power creep a lot of times can be very dangerous for a game economy, because what it does is it starts to devalue some earlier options in favor of more powerful options. I can't remember who said it, but it was, I think, one of the developers of Civilization, who said, given the choice, players will optimize the fun out of a game system. And you see this with D&D. Actually, Taking 20 recently had a video on Pathfinder 2nd edition and how the illusion of choice basically broke the system for him. He doesn't really, Cody doesn't like running that system, because even though there's supposedly all these customized options, it really, you start seeing the same action priority over and over again. So what was this thing? I don't know.
That was me visualizing that, you have all these options, but then there's only one obvious choice.
Yeah. And actually another Wizards product, Magic the Gathering, is really suffering from that right now. In their standard format, a lot of players are very critical of standard, because just there are only a few decks that actually work. So, and there's all these constant bannings and stuff. So with Tasha's, part of the power creep isn't some of the options, it's the breadth of what it introduces to the system. So a lot of the subclasses are just objectively more powerful than anything you'll get in the player's handbook, right? So things like some of the the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer is just more powerful than Wild Magic 100% of the time. And a lot of times that can break the fun for a lot of people. For me, part of the fun of different subclasses is not only finding unique situations that allow them to shine, but also measuring different amounts of risk and reward. So you might have a subclass like Bear Totem Warrior that's more generally effective, but then Path of the Beast in the right party composition might shine more so than the more generally effective subclass, So one of the things that concerns me is just when statistical power is valued over qualitative power, right? And what I mean by that is there is a whole set of magic items for casters here that basically allow casters of the right attunement to get a +3 bonus to their spell attack modifiers and their spell save DCs. Before this book, the most a spellcaster could increase their spell save DC by was 1, right? That was kind of the precedent that was set, meaning a player character wouldn't really have a spell save DC more than 20, right? If you max out all their stats and everything. I guess technically if they found the right tome, they could possibly get a 21, but even that was pushing it. Now you're talking, the new standard is a 22, possibly a 23. DMs, a lot of times in 5th edition, have trouble challenging their players already. A lot of times the system by itself, if you use the monster stat blocks as written, if the DM brings a monster with an appropriate challenge rating, a lot of times the players just kind of steamroll over it, especially if they understand the system. So to see something like this is just a little concerning, because it makes it so that you have less total options because there are some obvious ones. So, and what this also does is allows a DM to put on a designer's hat, go back to some of the old options, and see if there's things we can give them specifically, you know? So for example, one of the things I do credit this book with is there are some magic items that are specific to the Ranger. I think that's awesome. I think like Holy Avenger is a Paladin specific magic item. Ranger finally has it. There are no fighter or barbarian ones though, which is something to kind of keep your eye on. So as we're kind of looking at this stuff, maybe there is a magic item that we customize for specifically a hunter ranger, you know? There haven't been any subclass specific magic items, or maybe it's that we reward our players with a bonus feature for doing some downtime training, you know? There's a lot of different ways that we can like make those old classes feel a little more relevant. One of the things that this is just going to happen anytime you introduce new options, you're always going to introduce power creep, right? So because now you are getting new multi-classes and you might get new spells and you might get new builds and stuff. And while that's going to naturally happen, introducing options that are just objectively more powerful than what's already existing also isn't going to really help. So the other thing though, as a DM, you can choose not to use these magic items, but the trend of this design, I feel anyway, does warrant some concern. We also get a lot of really cool magic items, like Adam was mentioning some of the artifacts. Like the Cauldron of Rebirth is like really flavorful and really cool. Baba Yaga's Mortar and Pestle is there's some really cool, very story-rich fodder there that can be used for really like satisfying experiences. But again, the general just add +3 to a bunch of stuff. To me, really what it does is it just gives the players a lot of power without a lot of risk.
Yes, so you guys have been saying a lot of the things that I was thinking about, which is really that to deal with power creep, we really just have to, as DMs, go through each item that we want to use and say, okay, you still get this stuff, but this, and this rather. I like the idea of having risk versus reward conundrums. That's something that I've always valued in my player characters as well. I've had, with Rowan, there was the question of, is it worth the risk to strike a pact with Lolth, like the Spider Queen, who's almost always going to betray you with everything, but at least for that moment, I would have the power I need, or something like that. And so that's something that I was just thinking about. Another example of, instead of just like these things unlocking as you grow stronger, another way is that if you need that +3 bonus or something, maybe you have to give some of your life force, almost not your hit points necessarily, but something of you that temporarily reduces one of your stats, maybe, kind of like those life drain kind of things where with wights they can touch you and drain some of your hit points, your max hit points away temporarily. The other thing is maybe using exhaustion as well. Maybe using this artifact or just this +3 item requires that you take on a point of exhaustion. That requires not a long rest, but a full rest to get rid of. And so a full rest being 24 hours, by the way, for anybody who's wondering. And I think that would be something that could balance this kind of stuff out, because exhaustion is so detrimental when you get up into those like 3-4 points or something like that. That's why nobody likes to play the Berserker barbarian, because they're so scared of taking exhaustion points after they rage, I'm pretty sure is how it works. And even if you get all these nice boons, exhaustion is so it can kill you. 6 points, you're dead. So if I was a DM trying to use some of these what we're considering power creep magic items, I would say they're kind of cursed. It's not that there's just a charge, or it's not just that as you level up as a character, you get access to what's inside them more and more. They're cursed. You get access to the strongest, version of that item right off the bat, but you have to give up something. And that something depends on the character. Thank you so much for listening to some of our podcast highlights. This podcast is part of the Darkmoor Podcast Network. If you want to support the content creators, feel free to visit our Patreon. And please, game responsibly.